reflect, network. And so I'm going to start with Bernardo.
I'd like to do a brief introduction. Before we were discussing about regulation, about Central Bank of Brazil being able to be a collaborator, not only to listen to what the industry needs, but also to input regulation that is going to help us transact properly. So now, right after that, Hugo, we have the pleasure of interviewing Bernardo Motta, and we're going to be discussing cybersecurity and money laundering. Please welcome.
Yes, so Bernardo, thank you for joining. We're going to talk even more than cybersecurity and money laundering. Because Bernardo and I have been discussing many subjects that I think are so interesting. So basically what I want to do is pick your brain in things that you, from your point of view. So first, so everybody, most of our participants know you, but tell us a little bit of briefly what is your career, so they understand where you come from, and then they will understand your advice to the industry and your points of view.
Thank you, Hugo. Good morning. Good morning, I think. It's still morning.
Still morning.
It's a pleasure for me to be here. It's not so usual for me to talk in English in my country, but it's okay. I would like to apologize all of you, my Brazilian colleagues. But I think it's part of the protocol, so I'll try to do my best, explain a little bit my background in this, and discuss with you and try to exchange some views here. I think it's important for us to share views. It's not, I will not teach anything for you. I understand that we have experts here from several kinds of sectors, and IT and fintech,
and many countries.
So it's not my idea, I don't have even the dream to teach anybody here. It's just a share experience here. So I think it's important for us to take this opportunity.
So you've been working for Banco Central.
I've been working for not the central bank. At the end of the day, I started my career in the Ministry of Science and Technology, which is interesting for this panel, but dealing with international affairs. And then I moved to the Brazilian FIU. I founded the Brazilian FIU, Financial Intelligence Unit. So for more than 20 years, I have been working with money laundering and then terrorist financing issues.
Yes.
Discussing and negotiating aspects from Brazil and discussing the standards around the world, especially in FATF, the Financial Action Task Force, GAFILAT, the Egmont Group, OAS, CICAD. So my career was dedicated to discussing issues of money laundering, financing, the prevention and the combat of this types of crimes.
Any type of financial crimes.
And of course, looking at the prevention side, the regulation, supervision, inspections, but on the other side, the repression side, the investigations and indictments. So I had the opportunity to touch upon many issues, many items of this package, which is AML-CFT framework. So I understand that I could share some views, my views, and I try to put my criminal mind in discussing those kinds of issues, because I think it's good for everybody here to think about
the criminal prevention.
Yeah,
mind.
The criminal prevention. Yeah, the criminal minds is because we have to study and combat the criminal minds. Yes. This is the idea, because considering that technology is, I think technology is increasing every day, and we can.
Yeah, and technology is a tool, but at the same time is a tool for criminals. It's a tool for the criminals.
This is the idea.
Now, Bernardo also took some time off from working as a public employee, let's say, and founded the IPLD, which is an institute for the prevention of money laundering and all this and financial crimes. So and then he founded this. This is a nonprofit, and to be able to teach and train officials in the industry. And now it's back into as a public employee. So he has been, that's why his views, in my point of view, are so interesting. So my first question is broad, but it's in a way simple, is tell us from your point of view the things that are happening, from your background, from the things you're working on as this go between Brazil and international community. What can you tell us? What is on your mind now? What are the things that are interesting, that are happening, and that you think that the industry should know?
Yeah, I've never left the public career, so I think I had this in my soul, I would say. But of course, I took some time to go to the private sector and try to do different things. And one of them was the Institute. The Institute is a non-profit, as Hugo said. And the idea is making or preparing an environment for exchanging experience there with experts from any types of area. Of course, looking at the AML CFT issues. This is our business, our core business, I would say. And but looking at, I would say, putting in an overall, an international perspective, looking at the technology as a good tool for everybody, we could see we are living, we are facing, we are testifying, for example, the comeback of the pandemic, and the pandemic, of course, the studies, but the technology is there. So looking at the technology as a solution for any kind of business. So in this, looking at this perspective, I think we have to bear in mind that, of course, looking at a country, especially Brazil, I put Brazil as an example all the time, because Brazil is I would say, is a complex country. But it's a country that it's very worried about, for example, regulation. Regulation regulates the area for you to have good business. Of course, if you are a new technology, and now we are facing a lot of things, fintechs, cryptocurrencies, and I would say artificial intelligence, all of those kind of things, we have to have I would say a healthy environment for you to operate and avoid going to the black side of this market. So I think regulation is one of the key issues that Brazil, especially Brazil, and I think the world
Brazil has
as a whole
from
think
things
about
that have happened.
just for you to
so
prepare the land to be solved.
So what's on your mind that you think that are things that are happening that you told me about? I mean, conventions, work that you're doing internationally that you think is important for the industry to know.
I would put 3 or 4 issues that, for me, it's important to bear in mind. Artificial intelligence, data mining, and the last one, data mining, I forgot the last one. No, it's not machine learning, but yeah, so we have a fourth one. Yeah, artificial intelligence, data mining, and big data. Big data, this is what I would like to say. And of course, if you have all of this together, spread in a country without regulation, I think we would have a problem. And now, looking at the conventions, looking at the international discussions, and looking at the, I would say, legal discussions, I think we are on the right way. But of course, the technology runs fast. And the discussions of regulations or supervision or the prevention, for example, prevention against crimes, I think it's a little bit slow. It's slower than the technologies run. So I think we have to run behind the technologies to understand what's going on, what are those technologies for us to be prepared to regulate.
To regulate well, the privacy side, we know that, but also the cybersecurity side, but also the money laundering prevention side?
Yes.
I mean, using big data and artificial intelligence to help regulators see what's going on and take conclusions out of that? How do you see that?
And I think you put 2 good examples. One is the cyber crimes. now we have a convention against cybercrimes, a United Nations Convention against cybercrimes. I think this is one aspect of the issue. The other one is the 40 recommendations of FATF dealing with money laundering, terrorist financing, and the financing of proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. But we have to bear in mind, for example, frauds. Not only cyber crimes, because you have cyber crimes all the time. In Brazil, I would say, delayed a lot in subscribing this convention. The convention is from 2006, if I remember correctly, but Brazil just rectified this convention last year. What does it mean? It means that now Brazil must go or must look for putting at least some law dealing with the criminal activities of cybercrimes.
Okay.
Money laundering, we have already
Yes.
some kind of good framework. And I think the countries around the world are more or less at the same level in terms of level of implementation, some good practice or best practices in terms of looking at especially what is the product, what we are talking about, what is the platform that they're using. We know that. We know what is blockchain. What is blockchain? Looking at the prevention side. So we have to understand what is that. Put the players, who are the players that are making business on this environment, this platform, or I don't know, with this new technology, for us to at least take care in terms of having the possibility of controlling those business without affecting the business itself. We don't want to put a regulation or put a medicine that is worse than the disease. This is not the case.
Yeah,
we have to
and
control
for the
without affecting the business. This is
for the industry, that's always been
a
the
good
case.
equation
because
that we have to find.
what I'm seeing as a consultant, talking to companies, especially companies getting licensed, either because they're in Europe and they're getting licensed in United States or in other countries or Brazil or the other way around. I see regulators more and more worried about the technology side. With Banco de España, it's been, and I talk about it because it's just been very recent how much the Banco de España now with licensing wants to know about everything you're doing in the technology side. I don't know how many of you know, probably you're in the business side of your companies and and somebody else deals with that, but the amount of pressure that the regulators are putting in knowing how your technology works, is in the cloud, what are you prevention, what are you doing? I mean, this is growing, and I think it's going to even grow larger. I mean, the amount of work that these companies have to put, because, digital, okay, we're in this process of going digital, but that doesn't mean that things are going to be easier in any way. No, you're dealing with different things. And what I always worry is how much regulators will, we'll see this in this industry, and I should touch wood, like tocar madera, but really cyber security issues this industry has had are not that major. Payments industry. Banks have had, I know some companies have had issues that they're not public, that I've known through my friends and neighbors, and they're not disclosed, but I of course I'm worried. I mean, I worry because we're going to see a big case coming out. I mean, and that's going to happen whatever every time it happens. When you have a big case, then you have a big reaction towards it, and regulators will react to that. So it's how we get to that before we get. So what do you think regulators should do in that case? I mean, yes, learn about big data, learn about that, but what do you think is the steps that how you see the future, let's say, if I can ask that?
It's a very good question, because I think we have to get the idea that the regulator is not the enemy of the market. We have to think about that. Sometimes
Yes.
it's a little bit obvious,
No.
but the obvious must be said,
Yes.
because regulators must have the possibility of making the business safer. This is the idea, the principle behind that. And I think, of course, the regulators will delay a little bit in terms of understanding what is the market. But of course, the idea is preparing all of the possibilities to the market, to the business to occur, and avoid the black market. This is, I think, the core idea behind that. So. The partnership between the regulators and the market is essential for this kind of job. We have to be together in this, understanding, looking at the perspectives, looking at the future of the possibilities, the numbers, the amounts involved, persons involved, who is doing what. Because I think at the end of the day, we can manage in a more appropriate way, even to avoid that this kind of business, the correct business, can be misused by a criminal. Because at the end, this is the principle behind the prevention against money laundering. I'm not saying that this kind of company is laundering money. I will say that this kind of business can be misused by a criminal to launder money.
And you know, this is interesting because in so many years I've been in this industry, and it's taken a long time to bridge that gap between regulators on one side and industry on the other side. And it's, I could say that it's been my life trying to bridge that gap, put things together, and engage in the dialogue between. And I see, in many countries, regulators are relying on private companies to help them build the technology, process data, et cetera, et cetera. So in a way, it depends from what point of view you see it. From my historical point of view, I am very, very optimistic about those partnerships that you mentioned. And even when a regulator goes to a payment company to look at the systems to understand, and I think fintechs are more open to say, yes, look at what we do, in order to show that way. In the beginning, when compliance started, it was a difficult process for the whole industry, because I know that, and in my point of view, I think from the remittance side of things, I mean, we put so much pressure into compliance for remittances, which is really small amounts of money, and we as companies had to increase so much the money that we invested in those systems. Of course, now it has built all this industry that we know, compliant, et cetera, et cetera. But what I like to see, and I've seen it, is in Brazil, in those, we did the conference, as I said, at the beginning, 10 years ago, in a moment that was so complex, and everything Brazil has gone through. So for me, is a win in those partnerships, and you as a person who's been in the regulator side and in industry and with the institute. And by the way, we've been discussing the possibility of doing an online advanced course on what's the future.
And I agree with you. I fully agree with you. I am also an optimist in this scenario. Just to give you an example, for example, of course we have the regulation, the traditional regulation. For example, in Brazil we have solid regulators, the central bank, the Securities and Exchange Commission, and the private insurance superintendents. All of those regulators are very solid in Brazil. But they are I would say, advancing in thinking about, for example, of course, we have to look and assess in which situation they can do the different type of regulation. For example, the traditional regulation, the self-regulation. It's a good solution that it's arising for us.
Yeah.
and especially looking at the technology and looking at those technological tools, there is a good discussion, a good practice in being discussed around the world, which is the sandbox regulation, which is an experimental regulation, just to consider the possibility of learn a little bit more with the product and the service before starting the real regulation. This is called sandbox regulation, and I think this is a magical solution, and I would say, because of course they are considering, for example, the evolution of technology and the need for the regulation side, for the regulator side, to understand a little bit more before starting the real regulation. So I think this is could be a good solution in looking at this transformation, this digital.
So you think that
transformation we are
sandbox
facing.
regulation
Yeah.
will?
And for example, the central bank admits, the Superintendency of Insurance admits, and the Securities and Exchange Commission admits in some specific kinds of products, and of course considering technological features behind that. So I think this is important to say, because we are saying that the tradition and the most important regulators in Brazil are progressing, are I would say having an advanced thinking on regulation. For example, to put the technological issue as a good start point for them to work.
Now, there's another topic that we don't have much time, but I want to place this question.
Fine.
Because the payments industry and the banking industry have had a love-hate relationship that continues. Sometimes it works, in some countries it doesn't. The risk I've been working for how many years in trying to help companies open accounts and MSBs and fintechs, and do you think that relationship between the banking sector and the non-bank sector or the fintech sector in Brazil, it's healthy? Where is it going? How do you see it?
No, I see in a very positive way.
Yeah.
For example, my best example is the taxis and Uber. I think they can live together. Now we are seeing
They're coexisting.
Yeah, this is the possibility. And I think the traditional financial institutions are going towards I would say, the technological environment. I don't think there is a problem, there is a competition.
So you see those partnerships being built.
They are complementary.
Okay.
And what they have to understand is it's good for both if they are operating in a safer and healthier environment. And for this occur, I think it's important to have the participation, not only the participation of the regulators, but the associations, the market itself, the international bodies, the academia. So I think it's a good discussion for us to have. Who could be players to help them to coexist? I think we can do it, and I think it's occurring.
Okay.
In some extent.
Well, I'm glad to hear your opinion. Thank you very much, Bernardo. Thank you for being so open and to participate. Any of you, you can talk and meet Bernardo. He's always been, open and I'm glad we were able to discuss this way, and we're going to continue doing things together. I hope so.
Thank you. For me, it's a pleasure to be here once again. I see friends here and looking at the market to discuss all of those possibilities. And I think from, I would say, a regulator perspective now, and from an institute, a non-profit entity side too, I think we have a good environment to discuss this issue and any other issue that it's important for us to make good business. I take this opportunity, and I would like to break the protocol here to, as the president of the IPLD, the Institute, I would like to invite you all, if I may,
Go on, please, do it.
Gostaria de convidá-la a todos para entrar no nosso site ipld.com.br, mas mais do que isso, estão todos convidados para o 4º Congresso do IPLD, que vai ocorrer de 10 a 19 de maio. As inscrições estão abertas, gratuito e o evento 100% online. Thank you very much.
No,
I'll
thank you,
be
Bernardo.
around, and
Thank you.
we
Thank
keep
you
in
very
touch.
much. Really.
Thank you.